Go ahead. Look down.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Stoller. I'm an American anthropologist, and I was a colleague and a very good friend of Jean-Marie Gibbal. We shared many adventures in our brief time together. We shared interests in art, poetry, the ethnography of Mali and Niger, African religions, magic, and spirit possession. I first met Jean-Marie Gibbal in the late 1980s when he arranged for me to be invited to a colloquium at Cerisy-la-Salle, which was in part about spirit possession ceremonies. From that time forward, we became very close colleagues and very, very good friends, and I must say that his work inspired me to make an attempt to write more literary and more innovative ethnographies in my own work. Jean-Marie was a figure larger than life. He was a very big man, big physically and big emotionally. He had a huge heart. He was very generous, and I must say that having experienced things with him was never dull. You never knew what to expect when you were hanging around with Jean-Marie. And the reason for that is that he was passionate about life and passionate about following things that were of immediate interest to him, so that you never knew what was going to happen when you spent time with him. I'll give you a very brief example. In the late 1980s, he invited me to his house in the north of Paris in the 19th arrondissement. One of the few people that I knew in Paris who actually had an entire house with a garden in front. And so I went there around noon, and he invited me in, welcomed me generously to his house, and we were going to have lunch. He was going to make me lunch, and he gave me immediately, we sat down in the salon, and he gave me kyrs to drink, and we started drinking kyrs and talking about anthropology and Africa and questions of religion and art. And then suddenly there was a knock on the door, and it turned out that a man from the gas company had come for an appointment because he was going to regulate a faulty gas line of some sort in Jean-Marie's his oven. So the man came in, and Jean-Marie, as was his custom, said, "Well, please, before you start working, come and have a kyr with us. Let's drink an aperitif together." So the man sat down. And one kyr followed another, followed by another, and the discussion became very intense about American politics, French politics, conditions of social life, literature. The man was quite well informed, and we had a delightful afternoon. And the time went by very, very quickly, and then in the end the man said, "Well, it's time for me to quit." And so he quickly did his work on Jean-Marie's oven. And before we knew it, it was 5:30 in the evening, he left. Jean-Marie looked at me with a kind of quizzical look. He said, "Well, maybe we should continue with our aperitifs, and I will make you dinner." And so that was the way things went with Jean-Marie. You never knew what to expect. And this is something that attracted me to him. He was a lover of life, someone who consumed life, someone who was very excited by all the prospects that life presented to him. And this love of life is very much underscores his work, his writing. His writing that I know best, of course, has to do with his descriptions of spirit possession in Mali, which corresponds more closely to my own expertise. And I must say that he's one of the first people to write innovatively about African religions, and his first book, Tambour d'Eau, was indeed a book in two parts. The first part was a sort of literary carnet de route, sort of a description of his travels through the western part of Mali. And the second part was a more formal anthropological analysis. And this kind of thing had not been done very often, either in American or French anthropology, and I found reading it to be quite inspiring. His second book that drew a lot of attention and was important for me was his book called Guérisseur et Magicien du Sahel, which was 3 life histories of 3 particular healers in the Sahel. One was a Soninke man, another was a Bamana, and a third was a Songhai. And these again were, portraits of individual men and their practices in the arts of healing. Again, a very sort of innovative text that had a lot of impact on anthropologists of my generation. The third book that I know most intimately was his last sort of ethnography, which is published in English in 1994. The English translation is The Genies of the River Niger, Genie of the River Niger, and that book was a lovely sort of aesthetic reaction to a cult called the Gimbala, which is a sort of river spirit cult practiced by Songhai people in the upper reaches of the Niger River. And that book was a beautiful lyrical exposition, not just about spirit possession, but also about ecological change, social change, and the nature of social and religious life itself. And this book was, it was a sort of artful ethnography, if you will, done by someone who was both an anthropologist and a poet. And for me, this book will live on for many generations. It's a rich source of inspiration for those of us interested in African religions. I guess the greatest dream that any writer can have is that his or her words live on beyond their death. And in a sense, Jean-Marie, writing in the 1980s, was writing for the future. He was writing in the hope that his words would be read and discussed long after his own death. And I think that that dream for him has been met, because his lyrical words and his evocations of Sahelian life will live long, they will be read and discussed for many generations to come, and that is a gift to us all. Thank you very much.